here. Welcome to the FY19 New Mexico Main Street Capital Outlay Public Infrastructure Funding Pre-Application Webinar. Apparently I was ready to go at 2 a.m. this morning, but Anna told me I had to wait, so we waited till 2 p.m. I do want to thank you all for attending, and please do be sure to share information with your local government because it's going to be important for you and them to be on the same page as you work on putting your proposals together. So we are doing something a little different than we have in the past. This is our second time actually looking more for submissions of project proposals rather than doing the full RFPs that we used to do. I'm sure for you, just as well as myself, when we had to put those RFP applications together, they weren't fun for anybody. And I think it was a lot of work. And we wanted to change things up, give you an opportunity to still apply without going through the full process. So we are asking for different documentation, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that later. But these proposals are meant to be somewhat different than the former RFPs that we used to put together in binders and having 5 copies. And I think my office is still full of many of those applications, and we're trying to cut back on paper this time. So the proposal date is due on September 28th, 2018, and these will be filed electronically. So when you do file them, please do make sure you get a response from me, just indicating that and verifying that I did receive your proposal. So I just wanted to really quick go over the legislative enabling and appropriation language. You know, we have run to, it always depends on how the language is spelled out in terms of what we can actually use the money for. And we were very careful to make sure that this one included planning, design, and construction of infrastructure projects throughout our Main Street districts statewide, and that includes our arts and cultural districts as well. We did get a $500,000 appropriation this year. You know, as many of you know, next year we're going after $14 million. At least that's going to be the ask. There is more money available during the next session, and we do have currently, I believe it's about a $14 million backlog in public infrastructure projects that are already construction ready, and we have another 21 million, I'm sorry, in projects that are still waiting for construction documents. So we know there's a huge need. We know that all of you are interested in doing public infrastructure projects, but it's going to take really a statewide and I think organizational through the Main Street Network effort to try to get more money next year. So, you know, we are fortunate that we got $500,000. We know that's not enough to go around. So, you know, it is going to be a competitive process. So, you know, we do look forward to reading your submissions and hope that you put your best foot forward in putting those together. So, you know, I think part of one thing we have to say is that the grant award is contingent upon funding through the state legislature, but we can say that the bonds were sold in June, so the money is available and it's ready to go. So we are actually hoping to get projects moving late winter, at least start getting the money moving and the money available for projects late winter, early spring. So with that, we do want to say that the focus for this capital outlay funding is to leverage economic development projects, private sector, building rehabilitations within your district. So, you know, I know in the past we have funded public buildings, cultural facilities, those type of projects, but I think the intent for the public infrastructure infrastructure funding going forward. And it's kind of really connected to how we've been working with our great blocks, is to really focus on the infrastructure itself and look to the private sector to bring in the reinvestment money or go after other types of funding for other building and property rehabilitations. Eligible programs. So most of you, I'm sure, are all a Main Street, either a Main Street America accredited program or a state authorized arts and cultural district or compound. Now we do, because there is limited funding, we are limiting it to one application per community. So if you have a Main Street and ACD program that's combined, we do want to make sure that you're working with your board to select an appropriate project that can serve a dual purpose in terms of both the ACD and Main Street designations. And if you're a community that has separate ACD and Main Street organizations, and we only have a couple of those, we do want to make sure that you're working together and not submitting multiple applications, but rather trying to work together to do something that's mutually beneficial to both of your organizations. So please do connect with your other arts and cultural district if you have a separate one to work through that, and if you need any assistance or want to talk through particular projects, feel free to connect with us. And we only have really one, where there is no Main Street program, we really only have one, and this is Mora Arts and Cultural Compound. They may submit one project proposal. So general eligibility criteria. We do expect the local Main Street organization to have a full-time executive director and be up to date with all their compliance documents. And I know we are going through or getting ready to ramp up our site visits, and I know those things are going to be ongoing. So as long as if you're a Main Street America accredited program this year, that means that all your stuff was up to date. But do go forward as you go forward and working on your site visits, update those compliance documents. But we understand that that is going to be in a state of flux over the next few months as we gear up towards those site visits. And also, for communities that National Main Street allows, that are smaller communities, that allows a half-time or three-fourths time director, that will suffice as the equivalent of a full-time executive director based on your population size. And if you have any questions around that, feel free to connect with us and we can verify what that population threshold is. So in terms of submitting the application, your local government must be a partner. They are the ones that are going to have to receive and manage the funds if awarded. So rather than go through, and I know in the past we would, ask for a resolution of support from the local government, but in this case, because we are trying to not put a lot of work on the front end until we know that you were actually going to get awarded, we will just take a letter of agreement that is signed by whoever your local government partner is. It could be a city manager, it could be the mayor, it could be the community development director, if that is who your contact person is. The other thing is the local government must have a current audit. Their audit must be up to date with the Secretary of, or the Office of the Auditor. All those things are, most of them are compliant. I know if, depending on when projects are awarded, right now we are still going off of FY17 audits up until December, I think it's December 1st. Any projects awarded after December 1st, we're going to need the FY18 audits, which usually are up on the auditor's website, I think by January 5th. So you can go to the state auditor's website and look up to see whether your community's audit is up to date and that there's no significant findings, because we have to run that through ASD before we can move any project forward. But just so you know, most communities are up to date, and we usually don't have any problems with the audit. One of the other criteria is because we have a limited amount of funding and we really have to show product with the grants that we are awarding. If you have any previous MainStreet Capital Outlay or state LEDA funds that were funded for Main Street projects, and this is different than other businesses or other projects that your city may have gotten LEDA fund that they're still working on. But this is just only LEDA funds for Main Street projects. Then that money must be expended and invoiced by the date of the application submittal. And the whole idea here is we want to make sure that people are moving money when they do get capital outlay. So we don't want to start stacking money on top of money, especially on different projects. So please do, if you have any open projects, get those submitted and completed as soon as possible. The project proposal should be connected to your ETS and your district master plan or metropolitan redevelopment area plan. And if it's applicable, and this isn't always the case, but in many cases it is, if it's connected to, if it's in a historic district or it's part of a historic property, we do need to make sure that it meets the requirements of the Historic Preservation Division. And if it's in any kind of New Mexico Department of Transportation right-of-way, we do need to make sure that you're engaging with DOT and that they're aware of the project and that we're not going to have any problems moving that project forward. Part of the part of the criteria that we need, and this is for all projects, we do need the submittal of a full project budget, and there will be more detail depending on what type of which type of project you are putting forward, whether it's a construction document or for construction funding. And then finally, projects that are submitted, and you do want to be cognizant of this when you put in your application and developing your timelines, that we are looking for projects to be completed by August 2020. And again, the whole idea is to move projects forward so that we could show the legislature, one, that we're moving projects quickly, that their money's being put to use, they're not sitting and waiting for other funding, but we can show product, and it's a good way for them to want to give us more money. So there are some matching requirements, and the minimum is 30% match, so that's $3 for every $10 that you request. And of that 30%, 60% has to be in cash from either the local government, other state resources outside of state capital outlay funds, because you can't match capital outlay with capital outlay. It could be federal funds, foundation, grant resources. It could be through a partner organization. So we are very open to how that cash match comes into play, but we do need to, it has to be something that's contributing to the project that is a direct cash match. We also allow 40% of that match, of that 30%, to come in in-kind contributions, and that could be through the Main Street organizations, the local government, and there are many things that qualify for that state match, or for that, I'm sorry, for that in-kind match, and there's a number of examples listed in the application, so please review those and let us know if you have any questions. We also, and I know there was a question earlier when we first put the, released the call for projects. If you do have a project that you are currently working on, and your local government has put some money towards that exact project, in terms of, you know, paying for professional services, we will consider that as part of the cash match if it's something that was done in the last 2 years. And again, that has to be something that's directly related to the project that you're submitting an application for. So, you know, we're going to have to consider that on a case-by-case basis, but that is a potential avenue to meet your match requirement for the cash dollars. So we have two funding categories. One is, the first is design, planning, and engineering, which results in executed construction documents. I know I think we didn't get any capital outlay last year, but the year before that we were focused just on projects that already had construction documents. And you know, we know there are many more projects out there that are smaller in scale. You know, the majority of our funding over the last few years have been around construction documents, have been going towards the Great Blocks projects, but we understand everybody or every community is not going to need to or be ready to engage in a Great Blocks project, but there are smaller public infrastructure projects that you may need funding for that could really impact your district. So we are allowing up to $40,000 of maximum request for public infrastructure construction documents or to develop them. Again, we want to move these projects through quickly, so we are looking at these. If you're applying for construction documents, then you need to, the timeline to get them completed, signed, and executed is 2 years from the award date. One of the caveats in terms of applying, if you have an open Great Blocks project, because I think that's the only projects that we've really been providing public infrastructure construction documents for, you would not be eligible for this category if your Great Blocks project isn't completed. So this is just for new projects that if you already have construction documents that we paid for, then you need to be focusing on the second category, which is actually the construction funding. So as you're putting your packet together, please be aware, you know, of the questions that we are looking for around the application narrative. You know, it should include the documentation necessary to give us a better understanding of the public infrastructure project area, how it connects to your ETS and master or MRA plan, and how the project will impact property and business redevelopment. That's important because, you know, and these things should be real. You know, I know in the past, you know, if the applications that are most compelling and makes the strongest case give real examples of things that are doable in terms of how you're going to leverage that public infrastructure funding. So please do not, you know, where multipliers are tough to, I think, focus on unless you can bring the numbers together. That, again, that's something that's real, but we don't want to, you know, make our case that all businesses are going to benefit because more people are going to be coming to the district. We need something much more impactful than that. So if you are thinking through some of those things, I mean, feel free to reach out to our revitalization specialists, especially some of our new folks that are working under the economic vitality point to really flesh out what those real impacts can be and how we can move some of those things forward. And the final one is to focus on your financing plan in terms of how you plan on actually moving once the construction documents are completed, how you plan on financing that project afterwards. And please do, you know, we will have a professional review committee going through these projects, ranking them. Again, it is a competitive process, and the more you stay in line with how the questions come out in the call for proposals, the easier it's going to be for that person reviewing your application for them to understand how things fit in. Because if they have to start looking for it, if you arrange it differently and it's really hard for people to pull that out, it does make it harder for them to do and understand the complete project, but in many cases, you end up losing points, and your project doesn't come out as compelling as if you kind of make it easy for the reviewer to get exactly what content you have in there and what your project is and what the impact is. So funding category 2, again, is on construction funding for those of you who already have construction documents, whether that's through MainStreet or the city already put money into your construction documents. Here we understand that, you know, completing a project is much more expensive, and although putting construction documents together is, which we're finding is still very expensive, but we do have a $250,000 maximum request, but keep in mind, you know, we have 500,000, so if you're asking for 250,000, it's going to need to be a really compelling and competitive project to receive that kind of funding. So along with that, you know, we're going to need to submit electronic copies of the construction-ready documents and schematics that are signed by the appropriate licensed professionals, because again, we have to make sure that they're actually ready to go. So if we put the funding in, we know that the project can start getting moved. And you know, if it's a phased project, we're going to need to know how the project funds that you're requesting are, where it's going to go, what is the overall budget for the larger project, and what funding you already have identified and available. And again, we will work with, you know, if you're awarded funding, we will work with the local organizations to try to leverage our MainStreet Capital Outlay with other types of funding, and even move that project through the New Mexico Fund It or presentations. The program, for those of you who don't know, it's a program of the New Mexico Economic Development Department that our finance team runs, and it really gathers a lot of funders, federal, state, and foundation funders together to really try to put packages together to fund some of these larger infrastructure projects. And again, do focus on the application narrative, and it's very similar to the first category in terms of what we're looking for. Again, it's just the difference in terms of we're going to need the construction-ready documents and the funding plan for how that money is going to be spent. So types of projects that qualify for public infrastructure funding. You know, we try to stay away from individual projects and would rather, I mean, the most compelling projects are going to be those that are broader or part of a larger kind of more comprehensive plan. You know, we are focusing on streets, pedestrian safety, and street amenities, placemaking projects, and of course, Great Blocks on Main Street projects. So if you have any questions in terms of whether your project qualifies, feel free to call us, and then we will talk through that. I know in the past, folks have tried to apply for wayfinding and some smaller projects or one-off projects. And, you know, our take usually is, you know, if wayfinding is part of a broader project that you're applying for around streetscape development, and wayfinding is a part of it, you know, that can get funded, but it can't be a wayfinding project on its own. So just keep that in mind, because I know there's a lot of folks that are looking for wayfinding money, but again, the focus should be on the public infrastructure itself, and then building off of that with your other smaller projects. So I had mentioned before that the review committee will be reviewing, ranking, and recommending projects for funding, and those projects that are recommended for awards, we will follow up, and this is where kind of some of the other back-end requirements come in that we used to require on the front end, but we don't want you to have to go, for instance, to get a resolution of support from your local government unless we know that you're going to actually get awarded the funding. So once we get that, once we know that your project is awarded for funding, we will make a request for the final documents. One of them is a resolution of administrative and financial support from the local government, and again, this will include the match that they are going to contribute, that they agree to administer and receive the funds because it is capital outlay funds. It has to go to another local government agency. And we also are looking for a letter of support from the appropriate council of government that's in your district. And here, you know, the COGS have a lot of access to other types of funding. They are great resources, especially around public infrastructure projects, and you should be engaging with them because they can potentially identify other types of funding sources that can really help you get this project, package it, and get it completed. And one of the follow-up as well is the 3-year property renovations and renovation implementation plan that also focuses on business development. And here the whole idea is, and it's similar to what we've been doing with our great blocks. We've been trying to take a 4-point approach to these public infrastructure investments. So we do want to make sure that it's not just doing the project and then we're done, but that we're focusing on property renovation, we're focusing on business development to really build and take advantage of that public investment. So that is something that you can work with our revitalization specialists to finalize a plan. Again, I know we're asking for information around how you're going to do some of those things in the narrative, but we want to follow up that and strengthen that to actually put together a real plan so we could work together and really capitalize off that investment. So application, again, due date is September 28th. It is due to be submitted electronically. If you got huge files, we're probably going to have to set up a Dropbox because I think we are limited in the capacity for our email servers to receive certain sizes of emails. So we will work on that before the 28th to make sure that there is a mechanism for you to deposit in a Dropbox if it's too big to send via email. And again, this is something that I think is probably a big help for you and us because we don't have to put all those binders together and waste a lot of resources and time putting those together. And I think it's much easier for all of us to share documents electronically as well as with our review committee members. So make sure you connect with me. If it's a large file, send it to me by 2 p.m. on the 28th. And again, we are not responsible for late or undeliverable email submissions. So if it is a large file and it doesn't come through because it exceeds the capacity for our email, do try to send it. Don't wait till the last minute if it's a huge file, because if it doesn't get through, then we need to look at alternative ways to get that file. So with that, we are going to open things up for questions.
Okay. All right.
And I'll let Anna give you some directions along this.
All right. So as Daniel just mentioned, he's kind of turning it over to some questions you may have for him based on today's presentation. Some of you may have mic capability, or I can unmute you if you want to ask a question. If not, you are welcome to type them into our window. We can see those as well. And also, I know sometimes, even though I think this was a nice bite-sized package of information for you, you might be driving away from the webinar later on and you have questions that you come up with related to this webinar. There's something, Michael. Hey, Michael, do you have a question?
I did. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. So I was going to type it in and then I hit the wrong button.
Oh, it worked out.
So, I'm here with Sherry Roach, and she's our project manager for our Complete Streets project. We had a little question on the signed documents portion of the. Can you sort of verbalize that? How we were asking? Yeah. So here's one of our problems. So we want to apply for funds for part of our Complete Streets project. However, our signed documents might be slightly delayed after the 28th because of issues with our engineering firm.
Sure. So, Michael, what's like the ETA to complete that?
Well, it was supposed to be September 27th.
It was supposed to be September 17th.
Or 17th, yeah.
Yeah, we were getting 90% last week, but there's been a delay of maybe a week or two, which might put us right up against that 28th day.
Yeah.
So I would say it's fine. Just include what that date to get them signed and completed is in your letter of support from your local government partner.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Okay. Charmaine typed in from Silver City. Can the match be having the town develop the construction docs and then the application be for the construction?
So I would say it depends on what the timeline is. Again, because we are looking for completed docs before we award funding. And similar to actually, I guess, Michael's question, because, the idea is to get this funding moving by the end of the year, early January. One of the problems if they're not completed is we still don't have a full budget for what that project is going to actually cost, and we don't necessarily know what you're going to use the public infrastructure funding for. So that would be one of the difficulties around that. But feel free to connect with us offline and we can talk through that particular question more.
All right. And there's a question from Lawrence Blank. What is the total amount being awarded?
The total amount is $500,000. That's what we have. We understand it's not enough to go around for all the projects. And again, that's why we are hopeful and we are going to be really fighting for a lot more money next year because we know that there is money available.
All right. I think that looks like we've covered questions out there. Thank you all for great questions and for typing in questions. And as Daniel mentioned, on the last slide, there's contact information for Daniel, obviously overseeing this application process. So if you're, again, thinking about something you heard today, you can reach out to him. We will also post this on New Mexico Main Street's YouTube channel. This session was recorded today, so if there's somebody else, other partners you'd like to share this information with, please feel free to show them the webinar as well or send them the link to the webinar.
Especially your local government partners. If I know a few of you were able to attend, but for those of you that they weren't, do share this information with them because, again, it does have to be a joint application, and we want to make sure that they understand all the different requirements and what they are agreeing to if they're them and you are awarded funds.
All right. Thank you all very much for joining us. Take care.
Thanks. Take care all.